Hello, everybody. My name is John Higgins. I'm one of the reporters for the Seattle Times Education Lab project and the author of our Monday story on early childhood brain development. It was part of our series on preschool and early childhood education that ran this weekend. We had two stories on Sunday and then our story on Monday. We're very excited to have a panel discussion, a hangout this evening. Early childhood is a big deal in Seattle, so big in fact that we have two initiatives on the November ballot about how to make it better. There's going to be a debate on those issues tomorrow at the Seattle City Club, 6 to 8:30 p.m. That is not what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about quality and what high quality looks like. We have a panel of educators who work with kids all the time and have a lot of experience with that. So I think we'll have an interesting conversation about what makes a high quality preschool. I want to remind people who are tuning in that you can join the conversation too, ask questions. I think there's a yellow button you push that should be fairly obvious to jump in. So I want to start off just talking about a little trick I've learned about how to recognize a good preschool. I can't remember where I picked this up from, but the trick is this. If you are just going to visit a preschool and know nothing about it, you open the door, you look at it, and see what happens to the kids. If they turn around and they see the stranger in the room, and you are the best thing that's happened all week, and all they can do is stare at you, you know you're not in a great preschool because you're the most interesting thing that's happened to them all week. What you want to see is you come in, the kids look up from what they're doing, notice, okay, there's a guy here, and then they get back to what they're doing because what they're doing is so much more interesting than you. So that's my little trick. I'd like to hear from the panelists just maybe just a quick, I don't know if you have a trick like that parents, if you were going to check out a preschool or a daycare, how would you know you're looking at quality in a quick hit, but then maybe just reflect also on what you think makes for a high quality preschool. I'll let someone jump in, anyone who wants to jump in first. And you know what, I forgot to introduce our panelists so we know who's jumping in. So let me start. We have John Bancroft. He's a longtime Head Start director in Washington State. We have Laura Chandler, 25-year teacher at Small Faces Child Development Center in Crown Hill. And we have Lisa Williams, a veteran teacher at Kendall-Whittier Elementary in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thanks, Lisa, for joining us. She was interviewed by Claudia Rowe for our Sunday story on Oklahoma's Universal Preschool program. So those are our panelists. They all have a lot of experience working with kids, a lot of experience in high-quality settings, and so we'd like to hear more from them about what they think makes high quality. Who wants to jump in first?
I have a trick. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that. I have a trick that I talk to parents about for finding out if...
Oh, sorry. I think Lisa was telling us about a trick from Oklahoma.
Hold on just a moment. Sorry. For finding high-quality preschool is to always look at the art. If the art looks like process art, then it looks like you're in a high-quality preschool. If it looks like the teacher did 95 to 99% of the work and it's a craft that looks like it came straight from a teacher's hands, not so good.
What's process art?
Process art is where children get to experience the process of whatever it is they're doing, the painting, the gluing, the cutting, without the adult perfection molded in to have it be just an end result. If they're painting, it could be on newspaper. They're having the process is for painting, not the how good it looks, you know, how perfect your snowman is that's hanging up. So that's my trick I've always told parents.
Great.
Yeah, we adults might call it performance art or abstract art.
And Laura, did you have a thought on that?
Well, yes, I was going to with ways that we like to show our quality at my child care center, one of which is same thing. Like, look at our bullet. We have a lot of bulletin boards. We are lucky to be in an old school, so you can look at our bulletin boards. The other thing is to stand in the doorway and listen. What do you hear? Do you hear children talking to each other, are quietly absorbed in an activity? See lots of activities going on, children spread throughout the room, really focused on what they're doing. I think that would be another tip on a quality environment.
Okay.
I've just gone through this, actually looking with my daughter for care for our my grandchild who'll be arriving in 3 or 4 months, and certainly agree with Laura about the sound. You maybe want to hear kind of a steady, busy hum, not chaotic, except for an occasional outburst, but just hearing the noise of kids having a good time. If I was there for a few minutes, I'd like to see a balance of, I'll call it child-directed activities and teacher-initiated activities. Like to see a place that a child, these kids are in the same room sometimes for 8 hours a day, something most of us adults don't have. Is there a quiet place that kids can go sit and read a book? Is there somewhere else in the room a teacher who's nurturing a child? And then are there groups of kids working independently? You don't have to see all those, but I like to, over time, if I was there for a few hours, I'd like to see some combination of those.
Okay. Sometimes when people think about a high-quality preschool, they imagine that if we just do everything a year sooner, kids will get this jump start. So if we could teach them to read at 4, why not do it then instead of 5? Or if we can teach them to, get started on algebra at 3. So sometimes they imagine a high-quality preschool is a lot of drilling and working on academics and looking like they're kindergartners or first graders. I think our story on Monday got into how some of that may not be appropriate for brain development. We're not, things have to happen developmentally, and you're ready at different ages. So maybe I could have you ask about what do you think sort of quality looks like at different ages? What might a setting look like for 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, and how those are different from age to age?
Well, first of all, I'll just say, in response to the first thing you said, I think we have to remind people that kindergarten means children's garden. Just think about a garden. Don't think about kids sitting at desks. And that was when they were 5, they were going to be growing and exploring and doing some of these things. So if first grade has already been crammed down into kindergarten, sometimes cramming that down yet another year or 2 is even worse. So you don't want. If I saw my daughter in a kindergarten classroom in which the kids were sitting at desks, and I just went down to the principal and said, and got her transferred to a different classroom. But,
Yeah. Growing up is not a race. You don't win it by getting there first. I mean, you're not the best 4-year-old on the block because you can do 6-year-old things. Mm-hmm. You can be the best 4-year-old by doing things that are right for 4-year-olds. I think I just got a phone call just minutes before I got on this chat. My grandson is now walking, and his parents didn't force him to walk at 6 months to get him a head start on the other kids. He learned to walk at 15 months, which is totally appropriate for, 13 months. Walk by 1 month after his first birthday. Totally appropriate, joyful thing, and all they had to do was get the furniture out of the way. And I think with our children, our 4-year-olds, we do what 4-year-olds need to do. Racing ahead means you don't lay a good foundation. And what I do, like my 4-year-old math, is things that 4-year-olds need to know before they know the next stuff, so that they are ready for algebra when it happens. But you can't skip all the steps in between.
So Lisa, you've taught a variety of grades, right? So you probably have a good perspective on this question.
Yes, when I worked in Even Start, I had youngers. 4 is as old as I've ever taught. I wouldn't want to teach kindergarten. It's too frightening these days, the way that it's been turned into first grade. But what I found is that 4-year-olds, if you try to force a 4-year-old to do something that they aren't ready for yet, it's not going to happen. It will come out in a behavior problem or in an emotional meltdown. But I think that what people need to remember is that your 4-year-old isn't behind. No matter where they aren't behind, whether they know their alphabet or they don't, even whether they're very good at coloring or not. It's all developmental within that age.
in Washington State, I think in the past, this may be true nationally as well, when the quality of daycares and preschools was evaluated, it was sort of a checklist of, well, what's your teacher-to-student ratio? Check.
Right.
Do you have a safe environment? Check. Do you, I don't know, is it a warm, safe place? Yes. Is it any criminals working? No. Okay. And it was kind of an easy thing to fill out. You could almost probably do it over an email or something. And now, with the Department of Early Learning's Early Achievers program, it's a voluntary program, but to sort of get a star rating, what they're going to be looking at is much more detail, especially about how teachers interact with students. So things you can't easily check off the list, but you're going to have to go and sit and observe. And some of the things they might be observing, for example, like one example I'd heard was what story time might look like. So in a not so great quality preschool, a teacher would read a story and the kids would listen to the story. But what you want to see is, I think, what would you guys do with a story time? Maybe I'll ask you that. How would you read a book to kids to really engage them?
Well, who goes first?
You.
How do you read stories?
Trying to talk.
How do you read stories to your kids, Lisa?
Well, usually when we have story time, we do a song before.
All right, I'm ready to jump in. Laura, I read all the time.
Okay, we need to hear from one person at a time. It's probably a technical problem. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, John.
Okay, so I'm going to have Lisa go first, and then I'm going to have Laura go. So go ahead, Lisa. Tell us about how you do a story time, typically.
When we do story times, we usually we start with a song before the story. It kind of gives them a cue that the story time is coming, and there's a lot of like wiggle time in the song, and it kind of gives them a chance to mentally prepare for the fact that we're getting ready to listen to a story. And sometimes it's very fun to be silly with the covers and kind of play around with talking about what we think it's about before you really dig in. I know when I see student teachers read stories, their number one mistake is they open the book, they look at the book, and then they read as fast as they can and hope to get through it before the kids start to misbehave. And there's no fun with that. And so it's not worth reading the story if they're going to check out through it. So you want to enjoy it with them. Lots of questions and response times and predictions and voices and fun times. And then what we do with the story is after we've read it, it always goes back into the hands of the kids somehow. It's in a center. It's in the library. So if I've touched it, you can touch it.
When you talk about questions and predictions, maybe speak a little more about that. What kinds of questions or predictions would you ask?
Oh, well, it's super fun if your story is Aliens Love Underpants and you've got the cover going and you say, well, what do you think this one is about? They have a wonderful time yelling at you that there's aliens and underwear going on somewhere about this story. So.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Laura, tell me about your story time at your school.
Well, one thing is I have, of course, assume I'm with this group of kids all the time, and so I know their interests. So definitely nice stories that I pick are clued in on their interest. Just this morning I was with a group of children who had noticed the little green worms on the playground, so we read The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I saw those, and the kids were like, yes, we know that, and they left, and then it was The Very Hungry Caterpillar is it's a simple story, but the pictures are wonderful, and we went through it kind of slowly, and we talked about how silly it was that a caterpillar would eat a piece of cake. And then, of course, it gets to turning into a butterfly, and we had some butterfly puppets. So after we read the story, we get out our caterpillar puppets and our butterfly puppets, so it's one big experience.
John, I'll just add something that ties together a couple of your questions.
Sure.
I think one of the biggest indicators of quality is a well-trained and highly compensated staff who enjoy being at their job. And I don't mean to get too abstract here, but these are skills to be learned, and I would want my child to have the same teacher for all year, which is And the other thing is you need sufficient amount of staff. So I tie that to the storytelling. Certainly the teacher's going to read a story to the 6 or 8 or 10 kids who are interested, but it's also great to have one-on-one stories read in a child care program, and you really can only do that if you have sufficient staff. If you just have 20 kids and 2 teachers and lots of distractions, you'll be lucky to get one story read to the group. So I can't emphasize enough that when I toured the daycare center with my daughter, I asked the director, how long has this teacher been here? How much do you pay your staff? What are their qualifications? And then look and see what you see. Those are all important things you might not see in the first minute you're looking at the classroom.
I know one of the things that the early achievers folks will be looking at is kind of interactions. They want to see lots of really complex conversations with kids, getting kids to talk at that age about whatever they're doing, what they're doing at the sand table, what they're doing at the water table, and just those kind of conversations sort of add background knowledge that becomes important for reading later. It builds vocabulary. What are the kinds of things you do in your classrooms to enhance those kinds of interactions between teachers and students?
Who goes?
Lisa,
Laura?
go ahead. Take a shot, Lisa, and then
All
we'll
right.
do Laura.
One of the things I've found that really gets kids talking, and I usually do this when I have new people, extra people, more people coming into the room, there's always interns and student teachers and things, is that if you sit down to a kid and you say, "What are you doing?" Well, they aren't going to really talk to you. But if you can sit down with them and you start your own kind of conversation about what you're doing. So if you're in the sand and then you go, "Oh, I'm going to start scooping this up. I think I'm going to make a castle. I think everyone's going to get hit by a wave here." They love that and begin more conversation. But throughout the whole year, of course, you got to get to know your kid. That's where you really get down into the good conversations. But in the very beginning for new teachers, them talking about what they're doing always gets the kids wanting to jump on that train and start sharing what it is they're doing too.
Okay. Laura?
Yes. We have something we call the technique enterprise talk. And that was a term developed by Tom Drummond, who's taught a lot of teachers at North Seattle Community College. But the same thing he said, you start with narrations. You don't start with a question. "Hi, kids, what are you doing?" Don't do that. You sit down, you make conversation, you talk about what you're doing. Show an interest in them. Mm-hmm. Children love to know the adults are paying attention to them. Mm-hmm. And however, that sparks the conversation.
Okay. How about you, John?
I think I learned from Tom Drummond, the same teacher, divergent questions and convergent questions. So a convergent question is one that you can answer yes or no, or "How was school today?" Fine. A divergent question, it's what parents go through sometimes with their adolescents, but I found a good one with kids if they're 4 or 5 or 6 is either "What are you going to be doing this summer?" or if it's September, "What did you do last summer?" And not that there's a right answer, but there's no simple answer to that in their mind. You can see their mind working away at trying to describe to you what they're planning on doing or have been doing. So,
so a lot of people might look at that and say, well, kids playing with toys and talking and reading stories, that's what parents should be doing with their kids at home. Why do we need preschool? What's the point of all that if that's what good parents should just be doing at home? Why do we need you guys?
Well, I do want to point out that I work in a child care center. So these are parents who went to work and left their kids with us. So that's definitely why we need to give them the best experience they can and do what their parents would do if they could stay home with them.
Okay.
That's my best answer for that.
Sure.
It's not necessarily a choice.
And also it's nice to, teachers are paid to be with kids and therefore hopefully don't have to pay the bills, clean the house, cook the dinner, or have a and so they can do. It's not different from what a parent would do. It may not be that different from what a parent does with the kid on the weekend. It's just it's a little different, but in some ways it's just more of the good stuff.
Okay. Lisa, I wanted to ask you a question, and it goes to something I think that was in the article on Sunday.
Okay.
Often when we have debates about preschool, we hear this problem of the third grade fade out. Like, you know, the differences between the kids who get it and don't get it disappear by third grade, so what's the point? And it's very frustrating. I'm sure it's been kind of a persistent finding. And so I guess my question is it all on preschool, or is there things that need to be happening in kindergarten, in first grade, in second grade, to sustain or keep those things going? I guess the question is, fade out's often like pegged on preschool, like it's their responsibility for outcomes in 8th grade, or and so how do you hand the torch off to kindergarten and the K-12 system to make sure that whatever you've gotten going in preschool keeps rolling through their education?
Well, in my school, our school is pre-K through 6th grade, so I'm in the same building and the same meetings as the pre-K through 6th grade teachers. Okay. And I think one of the things about that people forget is that early childhood goes all the way up to 3rd grade. And it's all very good and well to have centers and story time and playground time in pre-K, but for some reason now it's not done anymore in 3rd grade and 2nd grade to still be seeing these children as children, still be giving them so many early childhood opportunities. 3rd grade is not treated like an early childhood grade anymore. And so it's sort of like that idea that, oh, we're going to try and by the time they're 8 years old, they're so advanced that we need to push all of this heavy reading and writing content that is still abstract, even though they're still concrete learners. Early childhood styles of teaching need to be carried up. That whole nurturing and oral language development needs to continue to be looked at as important through 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade, along with reading and writing.
John, I know Head Start's had a long history of working on that transition, how to hand the torch off to the K-12 system, and often one of the problems has been that pre-K and K-12 are not together like they are with Lisa's school, but are separate systems. How have you been able to do it, or what would you recommend for how to make that transition smoother?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an unfortunate fact that right now they are often in two different worlds that look at each other suspiciously or something like that. The best thing I've seen in White Center, part of Seattle, is we got a little grant from the state so that, first of all, the Head Start teachers went and visited the kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade classroom to see where the kids are going, and also, most unusual, the kindergarten and 1st grade teachers came and visited the Head Start class to see where the kids had come from. And I'll never forget hearing a kindergarten teacher look at the kids in Head Start and say, oh, they really do good in those activity centers, those classrooms divided into different things, not sitting at desks. And so it just was an indication for me that there's learning between those two groups. It's an artificial barrier, as Lisa said. We learn kids from 0 to 8, then different things happen. So this artificial barrier between the two is crazy, and it should just be a continuation in which these teachers are working together and not doing things so different like night and day between preschool and child care and kindergarten.
Laura, I guess I'd ask you the same question about transitions from, at least in Seattle, we sort of have different systems for pre-K and for K through 12, and indeed for higher education. But what we're talking about now is how do you make the transition from what's going on in preschool or daycare into the K through 12 system? And the context of it, we were talking about this sort of often noted phenomenon called fade out, where gains in big preschool programs seem to disappear at third grade, or the differences. And the question I guess I was raising was, is it possible that the ball's being dropped in first grade, second grade, third grade, and not necessarily because of something that happened in preschool?
Right. Well, I mean, there's so many influences in a young child's life, but I think mostly when I think about how I prepare kids, I talk about life, I think life skills. Things, so it's bigger than just what we need for the next leap, but think about social skills, how to make friends. They say one of the biggest predictors of school success is that ability to socialize, to feel comfortable in a school setting, riding the bus with your best friend, and so I make sure that I help kids with those skills, and that's something that's good for life, and that doesn't fade out. But, and then they say when you're comfortable, when you're sitting in the room, when you're comfortable with that group of people, you learn best. So I work a lot on community building with my young kids, and hopefully that can carry on into the next group. I think definitely our teachers in the upper grades don't get to work on community building and make the kids comfortable with each other, and then that kind of, it short circuits learning if you're worried about being bullied in the halls after class.
And those are some of the skills kids are learning in preschool as well, how to take turns, how to share, how to kind of basic things, but maybe not things that necessarily they learned at home or they will need to know for kindergarten. So maybe we could talk about that, how you build relationships and social relationships in preschool.
Even Head Start has been able to maintain, despite the pressure for sort of academic, narrowly defined, that the number one goal for Head Start in the legislation is the jargon social competence. And it basically means what Laura says, how to get along with other kids, how to express your feelings, how to disputes you may have with another child or teacher, how to use your words. It's just, I don't want to say it's simple stuff, it's all to say it's probably the most complex part of human life, but that's what the kindergarten teachers want. They're not worried. I've never heard a kindergarten teacher said, "Dang, the kid only knew 8 letters. I want you to have him know 16 letters by the time they get here." That's not the kindergarten teachers say. We'll teach them that. We want them to have heard a lot of words and to develop social skills.
What are some things that preschoolers can do that maybe we don't give them credit for, or we think they're not ready for yet? What have you observed in your preschoolers' ability, or even in younger grades, to do things that maybe in the past we wouldn't have thought was out of their range? Go ahead, Lisa. Yeah.
I've noticed that preschoolers, this is very funny, preschoolers sometimes have a lot more sense of caution than you think they will. Like, for example, when we do our unit on tools, I'll bring out, of course, my real saw, and there it is, and it's all dangerous looking, and they all look at me and they kind of have that moment where they're like, "We can't touch that. We're kids. We could get hurt." When you really do expose them to scissors and everything else, there's a lot of chances where or carrying a very full bowl of milk all the way across the room to the trash can, where they show you that they have a lot more sense of caution and carefulness than a lot of people credit 4-year-olds for.
How about you, Laura? What do your kids do that people might not give them credit for?
Oh, wow. We have compost, recycling, and trash. And we have 2-year-olds that navigate where to put lunch when they're done. Yeah. And we also feed composting worms. And they remember.
Very good.
John, I can't resist making an observation before we run out of time. You have 3 people here. One of us, Laura, works for an independent, standalone preschool child care organization. Lisa works for a public school system. I used to work for Head Start, independent, government-funded, but independent preschool program. So we could get all into that, but we're all saying exactly the same thing as near as I can tell. And so it's not this idea that the school system would ruin it, or that the independent provider doesn't know what they're doing, or Head Start's out. You know, you can. There are a lot of differences in delivery system, but if you have I just hear a remarkably similar approach to the important stuff about kids.
Okay, good.
One thing I wanted to say, if it's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Jump in.
You were talking about the transition and the independent ones. I did want to say that for a very long time in Tulsa, we've had the preschools in the same school as the upper grades, and that's gone nothing but splendidly. All the upper grade teachers admire us, and we're all colleagues of the same work. Just because the ages of our students are different, it's never been an issue to think down on the preschool teacher or to think that we aren't teaching anything. I think teachers always understand the value of early childhood education. That's always been one of the pluses, I think, of having us in the public schools, that the acceptance and the support that we receive.
Has your work changed how they do kindergarten or first grade? Has it pushed anything up from what you've done with 4-year-olds?
Oh, well, occasionally there's that 4-year-old who's ready to read and they're already in the first grade even though they're 4. But even the ones who know every single letter in the alphabet still can't clean up a puzzle to save their lives, or sweep up some sand within an hour. So we have one of the highest kids I have in my room this year. I can't with some of the simplest little tasks, getting their own shoes on their feet. That's still something that they need to do. So I know that kindergarten and first grade teachers are grateful for the work we do breaking the children in. But if they went on to kindergarten and still didn't know a single alphabet letter, it wouldn't matter. They know where the nurse's office is. They know how to put their trash in the trash. They know that when you're listening to a story, you hear it with your ears and look. I mean, the things that we teach are amazing. I was telling Claudia the day she was there, I was teaching a boy to open a box of crayons because he had never done so before. Putting your own shoes on your feet. I mean, if everyone can do that by the end of the year, that's fantastic.
Correct.
So no, they still have to do their kindergarten work and their first grade work. It doesn't push a lot of that up, but it does help the children be ready for their school socialization.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of our time. I guess I'd ask, does Laura or John have any kind of parting thoughts for us? Laura, I'll also start with you.
Parting thoughts. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation tonight. I think we could have a really good time if we could just maybe retire to somewhere and have coffee in the local Starbucks. And, Oklahoma to Seattle, it doesn't sound that much different.
No.
I kept my accent in check.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I'll just say that, one of the problems with dividing these into 2 worlds is that parents usually have to pay for preschool and childcare on their own out of their pocket, and then the day they get to kindergarten, it's free for everybody from Bill Gates down to the poorest person in the world, and something has to change about that so that all parents can access the kind of care we've been describing tonight.
Fantastic. I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and thank all you tuning in. And we'll continue the conversation.
Okay, want to teach us how to hang up here?
Sure.